Hey, welcome back to Diary of a New Producer. This is the weekly series where I fill you in and give you a look behind the curtains into the life of Ian Cognito, basically who's a new producer in year one, and just show you what he's going through, the ups, the downs, the good, the bad. And this is a special episode because this is the end of our first season. So let's get into this. My name is Micah. I was Ian's mentor, for those who don't know. Thanks for checking out the channel. If you like this series, you like what we're putting out, just give us a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. So as I said, this is the final episode of season one. I think this is episode number 31. Originally, the goal was to do a weekly series. I just got busy, as did Ian, and it turned out to be about 31 episodes versus 52. We'll talk about what season two might look like at the end of this show. But what I want to cover in this with you is I'm going to just do a recap of Ian's first year, and basically talk about the good that I saw, the opportunities for improvement that I see as I look forward, what I learned being a mentor and a manager, which I think will be really useful to you if you're hiring producers. And then finally, I'm going to share with you what you've all probably been waiting for. What are the actual results of Ian's first year in terms of revenue and new clients? All right, so let's start with the good, right? There was a lot of good I saw in Ian, right? And actually, let me backtrack just a second. I want to reintroduce you to his background. So Ian was basically new to the industry. He had done some personal line stuff with State Farm. He was at a major carrier for less than a year in their small business unit, but never really done middle market producing ever, right? And so came in green. He's a younger guy, and he also had this going for him. He was about an hour and a half away from where I live, and I'm his mentor, so kind of on an island, right? And that's his background. All right. So what's the good things that I saw? One is his phone skills improved immensely. From what I could see, he seems pretty comfortable making cold calls. He's very good at kind of I think kind of thinking on the fly and being a chameleon, right? And trying to just have conversations and engage in conversations. That what I would say he's done really well at. Another thing that I'm really happy with kind of how he's done is his ability to identify good prospects and have the discipline to walk away from bad prospects. I think all of us can fall into that trap. And I'm really happy to see how he's telling me, like, yeah, I talked to this person. They kind of said they're interested, but I'm going to walk away because it just doesn't seem like they're a good fit. And that could be, not a good fit due to the size of their account, due to just kind of their personality type, and they don't seem like a great client, like they'll be very profitable. So I like that he's thinking like that already. A lot of people in your first year, I don't see this a lot, don't think like that, right? You just like think, let me write anything I can get my hands on, and that ends up kind of biting you in the rear end down the road. So really happy with how he's developed that skill in kind of being able to identify good prospects. He's picked up good knowledge of the processes. So I think he understands how to prospect. He's done really well at calling out 4 to 5 months out from in terms of X dates. So he's not chasing X dates. He understands the due diligence process. He's picked that up really well. He's also been very coachable. He's really asking a lot of good questions. I was kind of picking my brain, wanting to learn more. All good things, right? But there is a lot of opportunities. That's what I want to talk with you about here. So one thing I would say is his ability to, and this just comes with like business savvy, business acumen. I think that can be improved upon, right? Goes and meets with a business owner, and how do you kind of talk to them as a peer, not like they see you as this younger sales guy. And that's something I think any young person will struggle with. How to improve upon that? I think you just get more reps in, surround yourself with, people who have more experience from you. But I think it's also a mindset thing, and just seeing yourself as a peer when you're reaching out to these folks, right? These business owners or CFOs, and not to get intimidated. So I think he could definitely work on that. I also think he could work on his. He had a high cancellation rate, right? He'd set a good amount of meetings, and then he'd have a large amount cancel. And so I would be curious to see how he can improve upon that, right? And that's one thing we're looking at and going to try to work on. And then the other thing that kind of goes along with that is once he's had first meetings, they stall out sometimes, right? They say in that meeting, yep, we want to do the due diligence or we want to take the next steps. And then they just kind of fizzle out. And that's something he can definitely work on. I want to add a caveat to all this. And part of the challenge, and this is something I learned, I don't want to jump ahead, but is I haven't been able to go with him on a lot of first meetings, right? Because we live an hour and a half away. So I'm not gonna get too much down that because I'm gonna talk about that in a second here, but that's been a challenge. So when I say these things, like I don't know why his deals are stalling out. It's also frustrating for me because I don't have an opportunity to really see that. All I can do is hear what he says and then try to coach him. Um, the last thing I would say that he could really work on is um, more consistently, being more consistent in his activity. When he's we did that analysis mid-year, we're like, hey, what's going on? Let's look at all your numbers. And I think he was making about 115 calls a week versus our goal again was 200, right? So I know he's up to that. I think he's probably been more in the 140, 150, but I still think he has the time. I know he does because he's got no clients basically. Um, so you have the time to get that 40 calls a day in. So just a reminder, if you're out there, a lot of it always comes down to activity. When you look at the end results and they're not there, I'm like, okay, yes, you can improve upon advancing a conversation, your business acumen, all that stuff will definitely help. But still, it ultimately comes down to getting enough at bats because insurance is tough. There's just going to be a lot of people that will take meetings with you just to see what you have to say, and everyone has an agent, so there's a lot of things working against you, and that's where the reps just come in. All right, so what have I learned being his mentor? And again, I am not technically his manager. I'm his mentor. So it's a little bit different, but here's some things I would do differently or think more thoroughly through, uh, given if I could redo the situation. One is the power of proximity. He's an hour and a half away from where I live, right? The way our office is structured here in Texas is we don't have a huge office. So I'm really his only mentor, but we're an hour and a half apart. So he comes into the office maybe once a month, if that. So if I could do this all over again, before he would have been hired, I would have thought through, okay, how can you commit to being in the office with me at least one day a week? Shadowing me at least, for half that day, making calls, I'll listen to you, something along those lines. Because when there's just so much you pick up from being around someone who's done it, and you can't, it's nothing you can just sit there and like, I can think through different topics to talk to him about every week, and we do talk weekly, but there's just something different when you see how someone, just those small interactions. And because we haven't been able to do that, I think it's hurt his opportunity to even get better quicker. So if you're hiring people, really take that into consideration, especially if you're looking at more of a remote production force. And it's not just surrounding them with producers. It's also surrounding them with marketing folks, account managers, just in-house people. I learned a ton being at a bigger agency, just going into the office. We had 100 employees at our office. I just learned a ton from those people who had 20, 30 years of experience, picking their brain, asking them questions as they popped up on the fly. And those were things you just learn now, right? Now I just know them. Uh, the other thing I would say that I learned is that as a manager, I take a lot of things for granted, right? Just little things in a process of, hey, getting the policies, how to review a policy, what to look for, how to communicate with a marketing team, how to communicate with an account manager. These are all things that popped up throughout the year that would be like, I'd get a complaint like, hey, Ian should have communicated this way with me. We're working on this deal. He didn't do this. And so there's all these little complaints that I would hear. And I don't want you to think there was a ton of them, but these things that pop up that, again, I've been doing this 13 years and you just realize like, wow, there's a lot I know that I just don't even really think about. And how do I translate that again to someone who's brand new, right? So that's something that I've really learned. And then the last thing I would say I learned is I would, again, I'm not his manager, so this is more speaking to you who are a manager out there, but I would be very strict on the metrics. And it wouldn't really be an optional thing. It wouldn't be like, hey, I suggest you make 40 calls a day. It'd be like, hey, this is your job. 40 call. I'm not going to look at your revenue, but you need to be making 40 calls a day, 5 days a week, 200 calls a week. I don't care if that takes you 2 hours, 8 hours, whatever. That's your baseline. And I think it's interesting because in the, let's say, social media sphere, or if you go on LinkedIn, you look at what salespeople are talking about, like they're just not getting on the phones. And it always boggles my mind because I'm thinking, like, that is your job, right? Is to get out there and to call people, prospective clients. And if you're not doing that, what are you doing? But it's also like, could you imagine if a hospital hired a nurse and instead of seeing their 12 patients a day, they were only going to see two? Just be like, no, it's just too hard for me. Or if you're a manufacturer and someone's on a punch press or whatever, and they're like doing a quarter of them out there, they're supposed to do every day. It wouldn't fly. You'd be fired, right? There's really no if, ends, or buts about it. And the same, it's just weird to me because when I look at sales, that's not the case. Like, it's just, you have managers complaining like, hey, my reps aren't hitting the numbers that they're supposed to be hitting. What can I do about this? And that's, I guess, the part that, again, if I was a manager, if I was hiring, I'd be a lot more strict on my metrics. Now, I wouldn't be a micromanager, but I would say, hey, these are the metrics you got to hit. Now, if you can hit those in 3 hours, great. It gives you a ton more flexibility in your day to do whatever you got to do. Learn, go on social media, expand your presence there, do some networking, but you got to hit the 40 calls a day. All right. So I want to end with the results. This is probably, I'm sure you're all itching to hear what these are. All right. So Ian Cognito is basically his 1 year anniversary. I think it's this week. He closed 3 deals. Okay. And the revenue total is right around $40,000, pretty much on the nose. So one other thing I want to mention, I don't know how many meetings he had said. I should have kept better track. I know halfway through the year it was at like 35 to 40. So I would say probably set about 50 to 60 meetings, but a lot of those were no-shows, right? So that was a big problem. But then one thing that I was really proud of him is he set some meetings with some really big accounts. It was either 3 or 4 accounts that were over $1 million in premium. Now, none of them have progressed yet, but we've planted that initial seed. He's still in talks with 3 of those 4, I believe, and might have some legitimate opportunities. Insurance, you're playing the long game, right? You don't just walk into that account and get an AOR typically, unless they're very unhappy. So, and I think that's kind of part of my job and ours as an office to figure out how we can surround him and help him when he opens those doors, right? So I think overall, when I look at the results, I'm not actually, I would say they're about average. What I really like is the size of account. He's writing 3 accounts at 40,000. That's a great trajectory. That's about $13,000 an account. That's awesome. He's targeting, I know in his mind, like 10 or higher. I think he always hopes they're around 15 to 20. So that's been, I would say that's a really, really good thing. He also went on a huge drought. Just full disclosure, his first month or so, he hit like his biggest account, right? And that account's grown already within a year. It's at about 20 in revenue. And then he didn't write another account until about 6-7 weeks ago. He wrote 2 accounts, and he AOR'd 2 of the 3. One he quoted. He could have AOR'd. He just quoted because it was just totally screwed up. So his pipeline's looking good though for the fall. He's already working on the fall and the winter. I'd say he probably has 50 to 75K in revenue of opportunities for that season coming up. And our goal, I told him, I said, hey, okay, first 12 months, 40 in revenue, whatever, that's fine. What should start to be happening year 2 is those seeds you planted year 1 are going to start to sprout, and you got to be ready to harvest those things, right? This is why it's so important to have that CRM. This is why it's so important to have that process of follow-up, because this is when you start to reap, what you sowed. And so I'm excited to see what the future holds. I kind of told him, I said, a good goal for you for these next 12 months would be to have your book be at 200,000 of revenue, or right around there, right? So basically, let's just say his goal is 150 to 160 in revenue, to write that in these next 12 months, or have it picked up on AOR and it's going to be booking. Because then that puts him at the end of 2 years in at 200,000, right? So on pace for that $100,000 a year mark, and then hopefully can keep that up. So anyways, yeah, it's been a big learning adventure for me. I want to see him succeed. So that's what I'm hoping happens. And I still feel really confident that he can get there. And so here we go into year two. Um, and what I'm going to do, the future of the show, what I think it's going to look like is I'm not going to try to do a weekly show just because it becomes difficult to do that. I have my own book of business and a lot of other things. But what I'm going to try to do is at least once a month, put out an episode and give you an update on kind of what we've talked about, what he's learning, what's coming up, in addition to all the other videos and podcasts and content that we're putting out. So if you have any suggestions for the show, I know a bunch of you always will ping me, hey, what happened to the series, right? Because I missed some weeks and I apologize. But if you have suggestions for the show or things you'd like me to implement in, let us know. All right. We want to make this as valuable as we can for you. And we really appreciate your time, appreciate you watching. So with that, go out there, go cause a ruckus, go make some sales. Thanks for tuning in and check us out for season 2. We'll see you soon.